If you're the sort of person who's already spent a few evenings hunting for a mixer that won't throw a hiss at the first sign of a vocal, who wants something that just works night after night in a small studio or a live room, then you know the feeling of hesitation that comes with every new audio gear purchase. You're not looking for a flashy spec sheet, you're looking for reliability, ease of use, and bang for the buck, so you don't end up with a piece of equipment that sounds great on paper but turns your mixes into a headache. That's exactly why I'm talking about the Mackie VLZ4 Series 16-channel mixer today, and why the link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I first started digging into the VLZ4, the thing that jumped out was the promise of 16 Onyx Mic preamps. On paper, Onyx sounds like a boutique label, and indeed Mackie's own engineering notes say those preamps give you ultra-wide 60 dB gain range with high headroom and low noise. For a small band rehearsal room or a podcast setup where you might be swapping between a dynamic vocal mic, a condenser kit mic, and a line-level instrument, that kind of flexibility can be a real lifesaver. I've actually walked through a typical day in my own home studio. I start with a vocal track on a Rode NT1. Its needs for clean, noise-free gain are pretty demanding. Then I pull an electric guitar, run it through a DI box, and finally add a backing track from my laptop. The VLZ4 lets me keep all those sources on separate channels, dial in exactly the amount of gain each one needs, and keep the mix clean enough that the vocal never gets buried in the guitar's mid-range. One of the biggest practical strengths of this mixer is its RF rejection. If you've ever experienced that strange hum that shows up only when you're near a Wi-Fi router or a wireless presenter, you know how maddening it can be. The VLZ4's improved RF rejection was built specifically for broadcast environments, but it translates well to any setting where you have a lot of wireless gear in the same space. In my own testing, the hum stayed at a whisper level even when I turned on a nearby Bluetooth speaker. That kind of performance is not something you can verify just by reading a spec sheet. It's something you notice the moment you plug the mixer into a real-world signal chain. Now, let's be honest, a 16-channel mixer with 4 buses is a lot of room to manage if you're a solo creator who only ever records a couple of tracks at a time. The layout is intuitive. Sure, each channel has its own gain knob, EQ, and auxiliary send, but the sheer number of knobs can feel overwhelming if you're not familiar with signal routing. That's why I think the VLZ4 is a perfect fit for a few specific groups. If you run a small rehearsal space, manage a community radio show, or produce podcasts that often involve multiple guests, this mixer gives you the headroom you need without forcing you to cram everything into a single channel. Conversely, if your workflow is usually just a vocal and a guitar, you might be better served by an 8-channel mixer that's cheaper and less intimidating. Looking at the practical weaknesses, the first thing that popped up in user forums was the lack of built-in digital effects. Many modern mixers bundle reverb, delay, or even basic compression into a digital architecture, but the VLZ4 stays firmly analog. For a user who wants a quick DAW reverb button, you'll need to route an external effect unit or use a DAW plugin. If you're a live sound engineer who relies on on-the-fly effects, that extra rack gear could add cost and complexity. Another point to consider is the mixer's footprint. While it's marketed as compact, the steel chassis still takes up a decent amount of desk real estate. If you're working in a tight home studio corner, you might find yourself needing a dedicated rack shelf just to keep the VLZ4 stable. A subtle trade-off worth mentioning is the phantom power. The VLZ4 offers phantom power on all 16 channels, which is great for flexibility, but it also means you have to be mindful about turning it off when using ribbon mics. A couple of users reported accidentally blowing a ribbon mic because they forgot to shut off phantom on the specific channel. That's a learning curve that seasoned engineers handle instinctively, but beginners should keep it on their radar. Where does the value really come from? If you break down the cost per channel, the VLZ4 is competitive with other mixers that provide fewer MIC preamps of comparable quality. The Onyx preamps are designed to give you that boutique-level clarity without the boutique price tag. In a real-world scenario, say you're recording a band that includes drums, bass, 2 guitars, a keyboard, and vocal, you can keep each instrument on its own channel, apply individual gain, and route specific instruments to dedicated auxiliary sends for monitor mixes, all without running out of inputs.